Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem. My name is Ofer. I am a licensed tour guide here in Israel, and I want to show you around the Mount of Olives today. The tour that I'm planning to do with you is of course a virtual tour, and I'm planning to walk down the Mount of Olives and to concentrate on the last days of Jesus on earth. We're going to start with a wonderful lookout, which is just here behind me. In a moment I will turn around my camera and you will get the full picture. But you see this beautiful picture behind me. You see the Dome of the Rock. This is where the Temple Mount used to stand. We will walk and talk about the Jewish cemetery of the Mount of Olives, which is also behind me. We will visit the Dominus Flevit church. We will visit the Garden of Gethsemane. We will walk down the Palm Sunday path, and we will take a look from outside at the Tomb of Mary church. So I got an exciting tour planned for you. Let's start. And I will start by turning the camera around like this. And here you see this beautiful, beautiful view of the entire city of Jerusalem. We are on the Mount of Olives. We are on the east side of the old city. The old city, of course, is surrounded, as you can see, with a old city wall that is about 500 years old. And that, let me try to show you with my finger. This is, of course, that wall built by the Ottoman Turks about 500 years ago. And then we have on top of the wall, there's a platform. All of this area is a rectangular platform on which the Jewish temple used to stand some 2,000 years ago. This temple, of course, was destroyed by the Romans. This temple, of course, was the temple which is mentioned in the New Testament. This is the temple in which Jesus was active in during his youth. And what we want to talk about today, of course, is the last week of Jesus' life on earth and what he did basically here in the city. We will walk on in his footsteps, so to speak. Let's talk a little bit about the temple. The temple, of course, is of the utmost importance to Jews about 2,000 years ago, the time of Jesus. The temple is a structure that originally was built by King Solomon, and then it was destroyed by the Babylonians. Eventually it was rebuilt, it was refurbished or remodeled by King Herod the Great in the 1st century BCE. And then it was that was then the temple which was visited by Jesus. Why was the temple so important? The temple was the focus, or the center, we can say, for the Jewish people. It was so in an administrative level, in a religious level, and on a cultural level. It was simply the focal point of Jews in this country. And Jesus, who of course was a Jew of his time, yes, newsflash, Jesus was not a Christian, because there was no Christianity at that time. So Jesus, as a Jew of his time, also came to the temple in order to do what? To give sacrifice. So this is what Jews of that time had to do. They had to give sacrifice 3 times a year during the 3 pilgrimage holidays, which are, of course, Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, which we're celebrating right now, Shavuot, which is Pentecost, and the holiday or festival of Passover, or Pesach, as it is called in Hebrew. During these 3 pilgrimage holidays, Jews would have to come to Jerusalem and do their thing, in order to atone for their sins. They would have to give sacrifice on the temple. So this is exactly what Jesus and his disciples do. Jesus, of course, is born in Bethlehem. He grows up in the north of what is today Israel. He grows up in the Galilee. And eventually he tells his disciples, guys, let's go. We're going to go to Jerusalem. And they ask him, his disciples ask him, we're going to go and give sacrifice, right, Jesus? And he says, yes, but another thing too. What's that other thing? And he takes them by the side. In my movie, at least, that's how it goes. He takes them on the side and he tells them, guys, I have a secret mission in Jerusalem. And they tell him, what kind of secret mission, Jesus? And he tells them, I am going to sacrifice myself for the sins of humanity, thereby sort of breaking the circle that was or that originated with Adam and Eve when they ate from the forbidden fruit. Okay, so this is Jesus's, let's call it secret mission here in Jerusalem. So they come, according to the New Testament, they set up shop sort of behind me on top of the Mount of Olives somewhere. Let's say they took a hostel and this is where they stayed overnight. And eventually they came, and I'm going to switch back again. Eventually they came down this Palm Sunday path, which we just walked down. I'm going to show it to you again. This is called the Palm Sunday path or the Palm Sunday way, because according to tradition, this is where Jesus walked on Palm Sunday as he entered the old city, or the city of Jerusalem and the temple. Okay, archaeologically, of course, you would have to dig down a little bit, because this is not the level, not the stratum of the time of Jesus. So about 3-4 meters, maybe 10-12 feet, you would have to dig down in order to reach the level of Jesus' time, meaning the level of the Roman times. And of course, again, this is the Temple Mount. Today we have the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim shrine since the 7th century at the center of the Temple Mount. And according to Jewish tradition, exactly here is where the Jewish temple stood. That again, as I said just before, was of course also visited by Jesus. I want to take a quick break from the Jesus story, as I want to show you this oldest and most important Jewish cemetery in the world. And this is, of course, the cemetery of the Mount of Olives. And let's think about or talk about why this cemetery is so important. According to Jewish tradition, the Messiah eventually is going to come. And this Messiah will enter the temple from the Golden Gate, or the Gate of Mercy. This is sort of around here. If you can see it, there should be a tower-like structure. I can't see it so well on my screen, but it should be around here. A tower-like structure with 2 arched entrances. This is the Golden Gate, or the Gate of Mercy. And according to Jewish tradition, this is where the Messiah is supposed to come through. And what happens when the Messiah comes? He will cause all the dead to rise up again, and together with him they will cross the Kidron Valley, which is just here in front of us, and they will enter together with the Messiah the temple and usher in that messianic age. And that is the reason, exactly the reason, why Jews have the tradition that they want to be buried here on the Mount of Olives. So let's take a look again. They want to be buried here. These are all tombs of Jews. Let's take a look at some of these tombs. The Jews, first of all, are buried here because they want to be the first ones to reach the temple with the Messiah, meaning they are buried here, and when the Messiah comes on a beautiful sunny day like today, hopefully, they will rise up from here and they will walk through this Kidron Valley. They will enter the temple through the Golden Gate, through the Gate of Mercy, and they will basically be the first ones to do so. So they have a front row seat. This is the idea, age-old idea, why it is so important to be buried here on the Mount of Olives. Let's take a look at some of these tombs. And many times people who come and visit this specific cemetery think that these rectangular boxes here, that the body is buried inside of here. This is not true. In Judaism, you're being buried in the earth, so people are buried underneath this rectangular box. We can say that the rectangular box is basically just the style or decoration, if you want to call it that. What we then have is the slab, the stone slab. And of course, we have Jewish inscriptions here, some verses, some psalms, the name, of course, the date of birth, the date of death. And then what you can see on many of the tombs, if not all of them, you can see those little rocks, those pebbles. So the question, of course, is what's the story with those rocks? And very simply, it is a way for those who come and visit the tombs of their family members or of important rabbis which are buried here. It is a way of visitors to sort of say, hey, I was here, and this is the way to commemorate my presence and my commemoration of this dead person that I came here to remember. So what Jews basically do on the date of death, date of passing of that specific person, they come to the cemetery, to the tomb, they say the Kaddish prayer, which is the Jewish prayer for the dead, and then they put a stone on top of the tomb, similar to what in European or countries or in America people would do in order to remember somebody. They would put a bouquet of flowers there. So this is in a way our way of putting a bouquet of flowers on the tomb. Okay. Also important to know about Jewish burial. Jews always have to be buried once they die as soon as possible. So no waiting a couple of days or a week. Usually on the same day when you pass away, you should be buried. Jews always have to be buried in the ground. Horizontally, I don't know, a couple of feet underneath the ground. And most importantly, I would say, is that Jews are not supposed to be cremated, okay? So they cannot, their bodies will not be burned. The idea is that the bones, the remains, should be intact for the time when the Messiah comes, so your flesh can be sort of, can build around those bones and you can be resurrected, okay? So that is the idea of Jewish burial. We will leave the Jewish cemetery of the Mount of Olives, which, as I mentioned before, is a pretty important, an age-old cemetery. There's a whole bunch of important politicians, prime ministers that are buried here, Israeli authors, some war heroes. Okay, so it's quite the important place to visit. We are going back on the Palm Sunday path. We came from up here and we are going down here. Of course, we have the beautiful, beautiful view of the old city of Jerusalem in front of us. You can see that the Kidron Valley, which is mentioned in the Bible, of course, is down here. The Dome of the Rock is here, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque is here. This is today the third holiest mosque in Islam. And of course, we can immediately understand that this causes religious and political problems, or issues, maybe not problems, because the third holiest mosque in Islam is located in the state of Israel, in a Jewish country. Okay, we have reached the compound of the Church of Dominus Flevit. The word Dominus Flevit means the Lord wept. Let us enter together here and let us, first of all, enjoy the very serene atmosphere at this place. And we're lucky because it's quite empty. Usually there's a lot of tourist groups who come to visit this place. But as I said, we are lucky and we have this place all for ourselves. Before we get to the church, I want to give you an idea of what burial sites at the time of Jesus looked like, because that's exactly what we have here in this excavation. Okay? Couple of things before I explain to you this archaeological site here. So we do have to understand that during Jesus' times, during the, let's say, Roman times, 2,000 years ago, the VIP Jews, the important Jews, the rich Jews, were buried in caves as we see them over here. And these are sort of rock-cut tombs. They're like little caves. And the idea is that people are buried in a niche, right? And they are left there for 1 year. And after 1 year, the family members come back and they take out the bones because the flesh has withered, has rotten away in this dry and hot weather over here. And after 1 year, they take the bones and put the bones in so-called ossuaries, which are little bone boxes, which I will show you right now. So let's take a look again at this excavation, and I will point things out to you. Take a look here at this niche. Jokingly, I always say that this looks like a pizza oven. And the dead body 2,000 years ago would be put right in here, and then this whole thing would be closed with a rolling stone. After 1 year, people or the family members would come back. And by the way, there's another niche over here. After 1 year, the family members would come back, and then they would remove the bones from this niche, and they would put the bones in these bone boxes. You see, they look like little coffins, but they're not. They're boxes for the bones. And if we think logically, it means that they are as long as the thigh bone and as wide as the skull, because those are the longest and the widest bones that we have in the body. So why is it so important for me to show you this? And let me give you another angle from the other side. Right here. So why is it so important for me to show you that Jews during the time of Jesus were buried in these caves? Because we can assume, and we should assume, that Jesus himself, as a Jew of his time, was of course also buried in this manner. Which means that if we go today to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which historically and archaeologically has a pretty good chance of being the true location of the tomb of Jesus, if we go there today, we see a church and we see the so-called edicula, which is that little structure, that little hut that is built over the tomb. What I'm trying to say is that we don't see anything that sort of resembles the kind of tomb that we saw right now. That's why it's important for me to show it to you, so that you get an idea of what these tombs at Jesus' times looked like. Okay, that is the importance of this excavation here. We are nearing the church. As I said, this church is called the Dominus Flevit church, and here we already see it. It was built in the 1950s. It was built on top of a Crusader church that is of course from the Middle Ages, and that Crusader church was built on top of a Byzantine church from the 4th or 5th century. Okay, all of this built on the same spot. And built here because we have from here, of course, the view, which I will show you now. And we'll say good morning to David. He's the caretaker of this place. How are you, David? Are we all waiting for tourists? We have no choice. Wonderful. Have a good day, David. Okay, so we're looking at the view, and that's of course the reason why this church was built here on this spot, because from here Jesus saw the Temple Mount, he beheld the beauty of it, and he was so taken by it that he started to cry, especially because he predicted that this temple would be destroyed, that no stone of it would be left on top of the other. And of course he was absolutely right, because the Romans in the year 70 AD or 70 CE, whatever you want to call it, in that year 70, the Romans actually did destroy the temple. And since then the Jews have no more temple, and since then, or shortly afterwards, the Jews have been kicked out of this country and the Jewish exile, or the so-called diaspora, had begun. Okay, so that is the reason why this church is here. I want to show you one more time this beautiful structure, as I said, built in the 1950s by an Italian architect called Antonio Barluzzi. And Barluzzi's idea is always to try and sort of combine or reflect the story that is being commemorated here with his architecture. So if I go a couple of more steps back, I hope you can see it because I'm taking a picture against the sun. So you can see that the dome of this church is shaped like a tear, and that of course is to remind us that Jesus shed some tears here. Let's together enter this church, which is one of the few churches here in Israel that is oriented towards the west. The west, of course, is looking towards the Temple Mount. And here we have that classic, wonderful, beautiful picture of this window. And of course, the reason why the architect Barluzzi built this church in a Western orientation is that he wanted the congregation and visitors to see exactly what Jesus saw when he was here, and that is, of course, the temple. As we said before, today there is a Muslim shrine. It's actually quite a beautiful structure. And this shrine is the oldest continuously used religious structure of the Muslim religion in the world. Okay, since the 7th century it stands here, right here. And then if you can see it, I hope you can see it, sort of to the right and a little bit further diagonally to the right, is actually the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So this is where Jesus was crucified and buried. And the idea of the cross is sort of like a crosshair, sort of like this. If I place it correctly, I hope, it should point towards the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, right? And the idea, of course, is what? The idea is that we remember that Jesus saw the temple here, and that the sort of the last week of his life, the Passion Week, started here, and that the dome, not the dome, but the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is, of course, the place where Jesus' life on earth ended. Okay, so it's the closing of the circle. That is the idea of looking out of that window. Let's take a quick look on the eastern side, the eastern apse of this church, which again is called Dominus Flevit Church, which means the Lord wept. What you can see here, all of this is the original mosaic of the Byzantine time period. The Byzantines are nothing else than Romans. They didn't call themselves Byzantines. We call them academically Byzantines because their capital was Byzantium, which of course is Istanbul in Turkey of today. This is the original altar. This is the original apse. And as I just said before, the original Byzantine church and also the Crusader church, they were all facing east. They were facing, if you want, the country of Jordan and the Judean desert, which is sort of behind us. Because this is how churches are oriented. And it was just Barluzzi, our architect here, who decided that he wants to give visitors that beautiful view that I just showed you. All right. As you can see, we have exited the Dominus Flevit Church. Let us take another look at this beautiful, beautiful vista from here. And we can just imagine how Jesus stands here and how he really sheds tears, cries, because he knows that the temple, which stood right here, or the temple area was here, and the temple, according to today's knowledge, stood right here where the Dome of the Rock stands today. So Jesus knew and predicted that all of this would be destroyed, and that's what pained him so much that he shed tears. Take a look at this magnificent, beautiful, and very unique view of Jerusalem. What we see also is, of course, the Mary Magdalene Church. It's a Russian Orthodox church which was built here in the modern times, in the mid-19th century. It is built as a burial site for the mother of a Russian Tsar. Another person who is buried in here is actually the grandmother of Prince Charles, the English heir to the throne. Okay, and just underneath us, of course, is the Kidron Valley. When we're looking in this direction, this is south. Bethlehem is not far from here, some, 5-6 miles, 8-9 kilometers, something like that. So it's just literally a stone's throw away from Jerusalem. What we can beautifully see as well is how big, how huge the Jewish cemetery of the Mount of Olives is. It stretches all the way down to the valley, right? And I just repeat and I say that Jews wanted and want to be buried here because they believe they want to be close to the action being when the Messiah comes, he will enter the temple through this golden gate, the gate of mercy, and all of these people that are buried here will have a front row seat, a front row place to come and join the Messiah by entering the temple from here. Okay, so that is the tradition, and I'm very glad that I can show this to you, especially since there are not many people here and we have, as I said before, this place all to ourselves. Let us continue. Maybe I will show you yet another view of the church right here. Okay, this shows you a nice zoomed out view, and as I said, the dome is supposed to remind us of a tear, like the tears that Jesus shed over here. We shall leave this compound. We shall go back towards the Palm Sunday way. We will say goodbye to our friend David. Have a nice day. See you. And we will pass again that little excavation area. And we will then take a right. And then, of course, we will make our way down towards the Garden of Gethsemane. On the way there, I want to talk to you just a little bit about the modern history and modern politics of the city of Jerusalem. We, of course, know that the state of Israel was established in 1948, and that in 1948, during what the Israelis call the Independence War, the city of Jerusalem became divided. It was divided into a eastern and a western part, and it was the Jordanians, right? Remember, the country of Jordan is not far from here. The border to Jordan is about 20-25 kilometers, or let's say 20 miles from here to the east. So the Jordanians came and took over and conquered the eastern part of Jerusalem. And basically the city of Jerusalem was a split city. The city of Jerusalem was divided between east and west. The western part was part of Israel. The eastern part was part of Jordan. So for 19 years, the Jews didn't have access to where we're walking through right now. The Jews did not have access to the Mount of Olives, did not have access to the Mount of Olives cemetery. The Jews did not have any access to the Temple Mount or the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall. The Jews did not have access to the Jewish quarter. So it is little surprise that the Jewish Israelis were quite ecstatic in 1967, when after the Six-Day War, the Israeli army managed to take or conquer, or whatever you want to call it, the eastern part of Jerusalem. Okay, of course, along with what we call today the West Bank, or the Palestinian territories, or biblically Judea and Samaria, and along with the Gaza Strip, along with the Sinai Peninsula, which they conquered from Egypt, and along with the Golan Heights, which the Israeli army conquered from Syria. Okay, so all of this happens in 1967. And of course, since then, the city of Jerusalem is what the Israeli government calls is a unified city. Of course, if you ask the Palestinian inhabitants of East Jerusalem, I'm not so sure that they will call it a unified city because they don't really like to be part of Israel. But again, that's a political question and maybe the subject of another video, because we are concentrating, of course, on the story of Jesus, which I want to now go back to. So we're talking about the last week of Jesus on this earth. We said that he came from the north with his disciples. We said that he took a hotel, a lodging somewhere up there on the Mount of Olives, and that he came pretty much every day on that last week of his life and walked down this very Palm Sunday path that we're walking now together on in order to access the temple. Now, what did Jesus do in the temple? He, of course, gave sacrifice like everybody else, but he also discussed with people, and he got on people's nerves, if we want to call it that. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to say that Jesus was a little bit of a rebel rouser, a little bit of a revolutionary. And we know, of course, that, or we have that picture in mind, that he comes to the temple and tosses over the tables of the money changers. So what is Jesus' idea? The idea is that he says, guys, this is not the way to serve God. This is a clean place. This is a holy place, the temple. You should not be making money over there. And he accused the high, or the priests, and let's call it the managers, the upper levels of Jewish society. He accused them of being corrupt, of being liars, of not being good people. And of course, if you're a person in power and there comes just a guy and tells you you don't have a right to be in this position, you're of course ticked off a little bit, and you tend to not like this guy and you want to get rid of this guy. So from a Jewish perspective, or from the perspective of the Jewish higher-ups, this is what they probably thought of Jesus, saying that he was he was an obstacle, he was a thorn in the flesh, and they just would like to sort of get rid of him. So that's one problem that Jesus had. The other problem that Jesus had was, of course, with the Romans. Why? Because 2,000 years ago, this is not called the state of Israel as it's called today, but this is called Provincia Judea, the province of Judea, which is part of the Roman Empire, right? The Romans make all of this part of the Roman Empire in the year 64 BCE. And since then, the Jews in this area see themselves as under occupation. They suffer, sometimes more, sometimes less. But what we know, of course, is that the Jews of this land yearn to be to get rid of the Roman yoke, if you want to call it that, and they yearn for the Redeemer, the Messiah. So here comes Jesus, and he says publicly, I am the Son of God. He says, I am the Messiah. He says, I will bring the kingdom of heaven on earth. I will usher in a new, better era. And of course, all this talk is not nice talk in the ears of the Roman rulers, because they will go and say, hey, what are you talking about? You have a problem with the way things are working over here? Do you have a problem with us Romans? Because we tell you, you're talking about, you Jesus are talking about a kingdom of heaven on earth, and we Romans tell you there's but one sovereign here on earth, and that's us, the Romans. And if you don't like that, then we will have a problem with you. And that's exactly the problem that Jesus had. So again, Jesus was caught basically between a rock and a hard place. He was caught between the Jewish higher-ups, the Jewish elite, who didn't like him because he talked against them. And he had a problem, or the Romans had a problem with him too, because he sort of wanted to change the system around here. And eventually, Jesus, of course, paid the ultimate price by being convicted by Pontius Pilate, and by being sentenced to death, and eventually by being nailed to the cross, upon which he died. And nailing or being nailed to the cross is, of course, nothing else than a punishment, a death sentence. This is how criminals, and especially enemies of the state, during the Roman time would be punished. A crucifixion, of course, was a very public, a very disgusting, a very just not very nice thing to do to somebody. The idea of the Romans is to make an example of somebody, to show that you do not mess with the Romans, that it's just not worth it. Okay, this is the idea of a crucifixion. And as I said before, Jesus is sort of voluntarily undergoing this process. He's sacrificing himself for the sins of humanity. All right. We have now reached the end of this Palm Sunday path. Let me show it to you again. We came from up here, and we are now going to enter the Garden of Gethsemane. And what happened here in the Garden of Gethsemane? You see, this is the entrance. A beautiful garden with old olive trees. And join me in entering this place, which again is very serene, except for the noises of the cars on the main street below us. But just take a moment, and I'll be quiet for a moment just for you to enjoy this. Okay, so the Garden of Gethsemane is, of course, according to Christian tradition and according to the New Testament, the place in which Jesus prayed on Thursday night. What was on Thursday night? On Thursday night, Jesus, of course, had his Last Supper with his disciples. The Last Supper is nothing else than the Passover meal that we Jews are still, eating nowadays. The festival of Passover, or Pesach as it is called in Hebrew, always happens around March, April, which is the time of Easter. And of course there's an exact connection between Easter and Passover for that reason. So Jesus comes, has the Last Supper right here, or sort of around this corner on the Mount of Zion. After the Last Supper, Jesus and 11 of his disciples, they come down into the Kidron Valley. They walk around here, and they go to a cave, which I will show you later, which is located just a 2-minute walk from here. From the cave, Jesus tells 3 of his disciples, guys, come with me. I want to go into a garden in which I want to pray. And they come with him, and Jesus comes to this place, the Garden of Gethsemane, as we know it today. And here Jesus tells his disciples to remain on the side, go hang out in a corner. He tells them, don't fall asleep, support me, because I'm going to pray to the Father in heaven. So what happens here is that Jesus sits on a rock, or lies down on a rock. What happens here is that Jesus is, according to the New Testament, in agony. Jesus is asking God if there's a way to maybe get out of the predicament that he's in, and that predicament, or the job that he has to do, is of course to get crucified, to sacrifice himself for the sins of humanity. And Jesus is asking, in the words of the New Testament, the Father in heaven, to let this cup pass by me, as in, if in any way possible, let me get out of this job that I have to do. But in the very next sentence, Jesus says in the New Testament, thy will be done. Meaning, whatever you decide, God, Father in heaven, this is what I will do. I will accept my job, but if in any way possible, maybe let me get out of it. I'm a young man of about 33 years old, but I will do whatever I have to do. Right? This is the story that we commemorate here at the Garden of Gethsemane. The name Gethsemane comes from the Hebrew word gat shmanim, which means oil press. Why oil press? Because this entire Mount of Olives was known for its olive trees, just as we see them here. And from these olive trees, you get the olives, and with the olives, you of course make olive oil. And the olive oil from the Mount of Olives was important because this was the olive oil with which you used to anoint the kings of Israel, as well as the Messiah who would come. Okay, so we have an immediate connection here to Jesus. I'm showing you this view over here to show you once again here the Gate of Mercy, or the Golden Gate as it's called. And here we can see just the tip of the Dome of the Rock. This is the pretty much exact location where the Jewish temple used to stand. All right, let's talk a little bit about the church that we have right here. This is called the Church of Agony. It was built in the 1950s. In the 1920s it was built. And it was built by the exact same architect, Antonio Barluzzi, who has built the Church of Dominus Flevit, which we had just visited before. So this church is built over the rock upon which Jesus prayed on that night, on that Thursday night, before his return to the cave and before his arrest. It's a very somber, dark, almost depressive church, and that's exactly the idea of Barluzzi, the architect. When we as visitors or as congregation enter this church, we should feel uncomfortable, we should feel in agony, we should feel basically the same thing that Jesus felt when he was here. I'm going to explain a little bit more because inside the church, I'm just going to show you around. I am not allowed to talk inside. So what we will see once we enter, we will walk all the way to the front of the church. There we will see the rock, which is surrounded by an iron fence. This is the rock, as I said, upon which Jesus prayed on Thursday night. We then, above the rock, will see a mosaic that shows Jesus as he prays to the Father in heaven. To the left of that is another mosaic in the apse, which shows how Jesus is betrayed by Judas. On the right side is yet another mosaic that shows how Jesus heals the cut off ear of the secretary of the high priest. That ear was cut off by Peter, who wanted to prevent Jesus from being arrested. So these are the three main mosaics that I will show you. Again, pay attention that the church is very dark and somber because we're supposed to be in a little bit scared mood, and we should feel the agony that Jesus felt here. Okay, so I will not talk because I'm not allowed to, but you will see the beautiful church and enjoy it by yourself. Загрелась. Okay. Okay, we have to leave this place. Okay, toda. Yom tov, bye bye. All right. So we were lucky because, yep, 12 o'clock. They closed this church. So we just got in the nick of time. Let's walk towards the exit. And we're walking past this beautiful garden again, or through the beautiful garden. And here's the friendly guardian who allowed us to take the last pictures inside the church before he's closing the whole thing down. By the way, here's the continuation of that rock that I just showed you inside. So this is also considered holy. This is also considered part of the same rock upon which Jesus prayed on that Thursday night. As we exit, take a look in silence at these beautiful olive trees. This is where Jesus prayed on Thursday night, the night before he was, or the night on which he was arrested. Thank you, bye bye. Have a nice day. All right. So now you know what time it is here, 12 o'clock, noontime. Two more things I want to show you before we end this virtual tour of the Mount of Olives. I'm going to walk across the street, or maybe not, but I'm going to walk in front of the church just to show you the beautiful facade, because in my opinion this is one of the most beautiful churches architecturally that we have here. And then we will walk across the street, and I want to show you, at least from the outside, the Church of Mary's tomb. This is, according to tradition, the church that was built on top of, obviously, the tomb of Mary, who herself died but was assumed to heaven. She rose to heaven. So that's where we will end this tour in just a few more minutes. So let's take a look. Let's see. Well, let me cross the street after all, because I want to show you this, the facade over here. Let's cross the street together, nicely and safely, because sometimes they have the tendency of driving in a wild manner here. All right, cross the street. Again, we see the western wall of today's old city. We get a very nice closer look at the Golden Gate through which the Messiah is supposed to come. By the way, why is it sealed shut? An Ottoman ruler in the 17th, or was it 18th century, I don't remember, but an Ottoman ruler said no Jewish Messiah is going to come through this gate, and he decided to just close it, thereby, in his opinion, preventing the Messiah from entering the Temple Mount when the time is right. All right, here is the beautiful church, and yes, it's definitely a better view from the other side of the street. Take a look. The beautiful facade, the beautiful mosaic on top. We can see, of course, the scene that I just described, Jesus praying to the Father in heaven. On the left side we have a group of people. These are supposed to represent, let's say, the academics, and you see they are mourning, they are sad, about the death of Jesus. And then on the right side we have people who represent sort of the simple folk, and they also cry and mourn about Jesus and his death. The other important and interesting thing, 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of columns. Each of them is topped with one of the evangelists. These are, of course, the guys who wrote the books of the New Testament. Okay, so a beautiful, beautiful church built in the 1920s by Italian architect Antonio Barluzzi, built above the location on which Jesus prayed on Thursday night, just shortly before his arrest. Which brings me to the end of the story, actually. So what happens after Jesus prays here at the Garden of Gethsemane? He collects his 3 disciples, who, by the way, fell asleep while he was praying, thereby sort of disappointing Jesus and basically leaving him all alone to fend with his problems. Jesus then collects his 3 disciples. They walk pretty much where I'm walking right now, to a cave that is located here in the Mount of Olives. And there they meet up with the rest of the disciples. Thank you, sir. There they meet up with the rest of the disciples. And then Judas joins them, and he sort of betrays Jesus with a kiss, as we know, thereby identifying him to the soldiers of the high priest. Jesus subsequently gets arrested. He's taken to the house of the high priest Caiaphas. He is incarcerated in his basement. He is interrogated, beaten up. Pretty bad things happen to him. And then on Friday, which is Good Friday, Jesus is taken in front of the Roman governor, the Roman prefect, Pontius Pilate. And there he is sentenced to death. Tradition says that he had to carry his cross to his own execution site. And this is where Jesus was then nailed to the cross, where he died. He was buried that same day. He was buried in just that type of cave tomb that I just showed you before at the Dominus Flevit church. And after 3 days, Jesus was resurrected. According to the New Testament, he then spent 40 days here roaming around the country. After 40 days, he went to the highest point of the Mount of Olives, where we started this tour. And there he ascended to heaven. And of course, Christian tradition states that he will come back, the second coming of Jesus, which is what Christians are waiting for. Let me show you, of course, the entrance. So just so you understand, we came down from here, from up there. We took these stairs. There is, by the way, a big underground cistern underneath this courtyard. This is the entrance then to the Church of Mary's tomb. But before we enter, and I'm surprised it's still open, but we'll take advantage of it and go inside. But before we go inside, I want to show you this is the way to the Grotto of Betrayal, right? Which is closed right now. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny chapel, sort of in a cave. And according to tradition, this is the place, this is the grotto, this is the cave where Jesus and his disciples gathered after they had their Last Supper, right? So that's right here behind me. Let's end this tour, which I hope you enjoyed so far. Let's end this tour by going down here into the Church of Mary's tomb. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk too much in there. If I do so, I'll do so quietly. So we're entering here, and this facade and this upper part of the church is actually from the Crusader time period. The original church is further down or at the bottom. And the original church was built in the Byzantine time period, which of course is 4th, 5th century. On our way down, we can see two sets of graves or tombs. What we have here are the tombs of Joachim and Anna, who are the parents of Mary, who is of course the mother of Jesus. And we also have the tomb of Melisende, who was a crusader queen. And then here on the other side, we have the tomb of Joseph, who was the husband of Mary. Let us walk down together towards the tomb. And you can see that there are some Greek Orthodox monks over here. And this church is being managed on alternate days by Greek Orthodox monks and then by Armenian monks. Okay, so one day this group and the other day the other group. So this is the little structure of the tomb. We will go inside together. And here we go. This is traditionally the tomb of Mary. Symbolically, it's left open in order to show that she was assumed to heaven, that she ascended to heaven. And that's also the reason why the top of this little dome is open, to show that she ascended to heaven. So take another look in silence. Let's exit the tomb again. And let's see what's behind here. This is probably the most famous icon of Mary. It's the icon of Mary with baby Jesus. Okay, and this is the classic way of showing Mary. You probably have seen this picture or seen it as a picture somewhere on the internet or in books. But the original is here, and you can see it's a beautiful, beautiful icon. This church, as I said before, was built in the Byzantine time period, 4th, 5th century. To be honest, I don't remember the exact date. And it was built in the shape of a cross. So it goes from here to here, and then it goes from here to here. Okay, so it is shaped like a cross. All right, let's take one last look at the focal point of this church, which is heavily decorated, as you can see, but the focal point is, of course, the tomb of Mary. By the way, in the Muslim time period, when the Muslims came and conquered the city of Jerusalem in the 7th century, they turned this church into a mosque. They did not destroy it, they just turned it into a mosque because in their belief, both Jesus and also Mary are prophets, so they are to be respected, and their memorial sites are therefore not to be destroyed. All right, my dear friends at home, I do hope that you enjoyed our tour of the Mount of Olives. My name is Ofer. I'm a tour guide here in the Holy Land. I specialize in tours of Jerusalem, but I do tours throughout all of Israel. If and when the corona pandemic ends, you are invited to come and join me in one of my tours of Israel. I will leave my contact information in the section below. Feel free to contact me at any time if you have questions, even if you don't want to take tours with me, but if you have questions about Jerusalem or Israel, the Holy Land, feel free to ask me. If you need help planning your next tour to Israel, even if it's not with me, I'd be glad to help as long as I have time. And at the moment I have a lot of time, so feel free to be in touch with me. Thank you for joining me. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I wish you shalom and best greetings from Jerusalem, the holy city. Bye-bye.